happy to have Ronnie Lee here tonight to give a talk on how to achieve animal liberation in a species society. Now, I am going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to read off the screen. Ronnie Lee has been active in the animal protection movement for over 40 years. He's best known for being one of the founders of the Animal Liberation Front, and in his younger days spent a total of 9 years in prison for direct action against the industries of animal prosecution. Since being released from his last prison sentence in 1992, he's been involved in various campaigns and educational efforts against animal abuse, and now believes that a combination of vegan outreach and political campaigning is essential for the achievement of animal liberation. So,
well, thanks very much, everyone. I hope, can you hear me at the back? Okay? Right, okay. That's it. Brilliant. Normally I stand on something high so people can see me, but I think you probably manage all right. Yeah, it's great to be here. It's good to see so many people at this showing at this very, very interesting film that we had today. I'm going to try and not talk for too long because we're going to have a question and answer session afterwards, and I think it's very important for there to be a kind of two-way process so that some of you can say what you feel as well as having to listen to me. Now, I thought one thing that wasn't actually referred to in that film, which is another very important way of looking at human supremacism and why that's wrong, is let's take a hypothetical case of where Martians were to come to Earth, right? Say, and these creatures were, for a start, that they were these creatures on Mars and they came to Earth, and they were massively better than us at all the things we think we're good at. They were more intelligent than us, they were stronger than us, they were more capable than us. Would it then be right for those creatures to treat us humans in the same way that we treat other animals? Would it be right for them to carry out vivisection on us? Would it be right for them to use us for food, to use our skins for footwear, to use us as slaves in the same way as we use other animals? And of course, human beings would say, no, that wouldn't be right. We would fight against them. We would do everything to try and stop that from happening. But going on the logic of us exploiting other animals the way we do, surely the right thing for us to do would be to say, okay, these creatures are more superior to us, so we're going to queue up to go into the vivisection laboratory, we're going to give ourselves up at the meat processing plants to be slaughtered for their food, and we're going to willingly go as slaves to those creatures. So if you look at that hypothetical example of another race, another type of creature that was so-called superior to us, and how would we react to that, then that gives an insight into why the way we treat other animals is wrong. That we would not allow that to be done to us by other creatures. We would fight against that if done to us by other creatures. So why are we, as a species, in general, so happy to do that to other creatures on this earth? And I think that's a very important point to make. Okay, now right, on to we've heard about human supremacism, the so-called belief in human superiority, which has been very well analysed and dissed, I suppose, by that film. I mean, I tend to regard the concept of human supremacism myself as being the view that human beings are more important than other animals. That this false sense of importance we have, that we're better than other creatures. And it's actually a view very similar to what the Nazis had towards other races. The Nazis believed in Aryan supremacism, and they thought therefore that other races of people could be exploited, could be abused, could be used as slaves, could be experimented upon. And it's a very similar mindset. And of course what happened with the Nazis is they were stopped, they were defeated in the Second World War, they weren't able to spread that philosophy, they weren't able to spread that way of acting, that way of living to the rest of Europe and perhaps to the rest of the world. They were stopped. But with human beings in relation to animals, that didn't happen. Human beings were able to carry out their supremacist domination of the world without being stopped. And so now we have a situation where it seems natural to humans to exploit and abuse animals in that way. As if, say, we imagine that Hitler had won the war, that this idea of the Aryan supremacy had become established, and we were now hundreds of years in the future, where that had gone on for hundreds of years. You have a child being born into that society, an Aryan child being born into that society. That child and that person growing up would think it was perfectly acceptable for people of other races to be used as slaves. They think it was perfectly acceptable for people of other races to be experimented on, because that was how things were. That's the world. You know, that's just how they were brought up, and that's the problem really we've got with human supremacism in relation to other animals. That it's something that people it's more or less like a brainwashing situation that people are in. That an indoctrination or a conditioning that we have to overcome if we're going to change the world, and we're going to create a world where we have animal liberation, or where we have, as near as we can get to animal liberation, in that human beings no longer persecute and abuse and exploit other animals. Because really it's all about human behaviour and changing human behaviour. How do we change human behaviour towards other creatures? Because that's what it's all about, is how we behave towards other animals. That's the problem, and that's the thing that has to be changed. Now, there's two ways that, or two reasons why a person would change their behaviour. One is because they want to change their behaviour, and the other reason is because they're too afraid not to change their behaviour. Right? And that the example that I'd give you is, say, for instance, I want to park my car somewhere to go into the shops quickly. But I think, if I do that, I'm going to get a ticket, I'm going to be fined, and so I don't do it. I don't do it because I'm afraid of something that might happen to me. So my behaviour is modified by that fear of the consequences. So you've got wanting to change and changing because you're too afraid not to change. Those are basically the two reasons, you know, that govern human behaviour. But to me, the most important thing is getting people to want to change. And obviously the way to do that is through education, through educating people about why it's wrong to abuse and persecute and exploit other animals, why it's wrong to consider human beings to be more important than other animals. And that's why vegan education is so important. And by vegan education, I'm not just talking about educating people about eating vegan food. I'm talking about something deeper than that, the whole vegan concept of living, about treating animals properly right across the board. And that's why a group like Vegan Ireland is so important, because that's a group that's taking that message out there to ordinary people. And that's something we've really got to try to do as much as possible, and we've got to try to formulate the best ideas and the best methods of doing that, and try to create as many groups as possible that can do that, because it's about educating ordinary people. So to educate ordinary people, you've got to be out amongst ordinary people. You've got to be out there on the streets. You've got to put on events that ordinary people can come to so they can be educated. You've got to try and get publicity in the media that ordinary people read, and so they can learn from that, and so on. Now, there's obviously various ways doing that, which I'm sure a lot of you are involved in. Street stalls, as I said, free food events, vegan fairs, media work, getting letters in the newspaper, articles in the paper, radio interviews, all that kind of thing. And I'd say it's really important for all vegans to be involved in that. And I know there are some people that say, well, you know, I'm a vegan and surely that's enough, I've become vegan and, you know, I'm not involved in animal exploitation, or I'm trying my best to avoid involvement in that. So isn't that enough? And of course the problem is, no, it isn't enough really, because if we are going to spread this message of veganism, if we are going to spread this message of anti-human supremacism, who's going to spread it if vegans don't spread it? Meat eaters aren't going to educate other meat eaters to be vegan, are they? Vegetarians aren't going to educate other people to be vegan. It's only vegans that are in a position to do that. So it's really important that vegans actually do their best to get out there and do it, and try to devote, you know, at least some time towards doing that. Because I know there's a criticism of a lot of vegans being uneating eaters or cake eaters and just being there for food. And we have it in England as well, and there's big debates about this. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with eating cakes, there's nothing wrong with eating buns and enjoying social events together. And that's important. You know, as human beings, we all need to socialise. And of course, we want to socialise, we like to socialise with people who feel the same as us. So getting together as vegans, enjoying ourselves and socialising, that's important, and that's, you know, that's an important part of any vegan movement. But more important than that is getting out there and educating people. So that should always be the priority. That should always be what we're focused on. And in order to do that, we need to create the right sort of structures to do that. In other words, if we want to educate ordinary people, we have to have groups where ordinary people are. We need to aim for a situation where every town and city has got a vegan outreach group, so that there's people there educating people, ordinary people in those places in as many ways as possible. And that's something, I mean, that's, even in England, that's a long way off. We're working on doing that. I'm a member of a group called Encouraging Vegan Education. What we're doing is we're trying to actually stimulate local vegan outreach groups to set up and to help them in the process of educating people. And it is a slow process, because getting people together, you know, giving people the confidence to get out there, do street stalls, do whatever's necessary. It isn't easy, because I think most people are naturally reticent about putting their head above the parapet, so to speak, and that seems to be a general human trait, and so it kind of applies to vegans as well. If a person becomes a vegan, they don't cease to be a human because they're a vegan, and so they've still got some of these fears and worries that humans often seem to have. You know, just because someone's a vegan, they don't lose those things. And so people are shy, people are worried about talking to people, are worried about getting out there. And so they need to be helped, they need to be guided by people that are more experienced about that, given confidence, so that they can then, you know, go ahead themselves and do it. And that's what we're trying to do in England. We're trying to stimulate the formation of local vegan outreach groups all over the country. And that is gradually happening. There's been a rise in the number of groups, there's been a rise in the amount of activities that take place. There's been an improvement in the way that groups get the message across. In other words, groups are doing more activities, they're gradually getting better with the media, that kind of thing. But it is a slow process, but it's really important. And obviously that's something that needs to happen in Ireland as well, and I'm sure that that's something that Vegan Ireland is busy trying to bring about. Now let me see, how long have I been going for? another couple of minutes, and then we can have an exchange. I think, as I said, we've got to be patient with ordinary people. This is a long process. As I said earlier, we've got to remember that there's been so much conditioning that people are brought up in a speciesist society. So it's not as if, and I think we can get frustrated because I think people that campaign for veganism, we often get frustrated with ordinary people because we think, well, why can't they see it? Why can't they understand about what's going on? And why can't they become vegan? You read a leaflet and then immediately become vegan. Because for many of us, that is kind of probably what happens. In other words, I mean, I became a vegetarian within 3 days of getting to know a guy who was a vegetarian that made me think about it within 3 days. And then I didn't know anything about the milk industry and the dairy and the egg industry for another 2 years. I wasn't aware of what went on. And as soon as I found that out, as soon as I learned about veganism, I became vegan within a week. So when I was younger, I used to think, well, why can't other people do that? You know, I did it, why can't? But that's because I'm not the same as other people. You know, we're not the same. You know, people that kind of actively go out and campaign for animals. I think there's something different about us than there is about a lot of other people. But I'm not saying that makes us superior or anything like that. It's just that we're different, that we're kind of able to kind of catch on to these things and to change quicker than other people, because I think people find change very difficult. All animals find change very difficult. If you change the environment of any animal, they don't like it. They feel uneasy. They don't like change. It seems to be something that's within all animals to be resistant to change and to not be happy with change. And that's the same with humans as well. You know, humans find change, you know, really quite a difficult thing. And so I think we have to be patient in our efforts and not get frustrated, because it's very easy to get frustrated and think, oh, yeah, I've been doing this for so long and not much has happened, so I'm just going to give up and just go and eat cakes or whatever, and not actually, you know, be involved in education. But we need to stick at it. This is a long process, and we are really very much at the beginning of it. And this is something that Roger often says, and I agree with him, that this is the beginning of a long process. But there's a ancient Chinese proverb, isn't there, that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So in other words, if you're going to complete this long journey, you've got to start the journey, even if there's still a long way to go in front of you. You've got to embark on that journey and carry on with that journey. So it's very important for us to be persistent and to be resolute and to just keep going, to keep trying to get more people involved. And eventually, I think, you know, with the right sort of tactics and the right sort of persistence, that we can do it. And I think it's just a question of just getting out there and, you know, keeping at it and encouraging more people to get involved, and we'll get there in the end. Anyway, that's I've got loads of other notes, but I don't want to go on too long, and some of it will probably come out in the question and answer session anyway. So if anyone's got any questions, then I don't know whether they want to.
Yeah.
How are we going to do this?
Well, first off, I think.